Welcome to the session on data collection, population, census, and sample. The objectives for this session are to understand the terms population, sample, and census, and comment on the advantages and disadvantages of each. In statistics, a population is the entire set of items which are of interest. So, for example, a group of people. However, a population doesn't necessarily comprise of people. It could be objects. So we could be looking at a set of light bulbs. A census measures or observes every item of the population. So in example 1, we select everybody. And in example 2, we select everything, as shown. A sample is a selection of observations from the population. It is used to find out about the whole population. So in example 1, we could select the people highlighted in red. As shown here. And in example 2, we could select the light bulbs highlighted in the red box, as shown here. What are the advantages of a census? Remember, a census measures or observes every item of the population. Theoretically, a census should give completely accurate results. The disadvantages of a census are that it is expensive and time-consuming. And additionally, the data may be out of date by the time it is published. Also, it cannot be used when testing, as it destroys the entire population. For example, to check all the ice creams coming off the production line would mean nothing left to sell. Or, for example, to check the lifetime of bulbs coming off the production line in a factory would mean nothing left to sell. As shown here. Sometimes complete results are not possible. For example, everyone won't necessarily reply to a questionnaire. Also, it is difficult to analyze a large quantity of data. Here's a summary of the advantages and disadvantages of a census. Let's now take a look at a sample. The advantages of sampling are that it is less time-consuming and less expensive than a census. There are fewer people required to respond. So notice in a population we've got everybody who's required to respond, and in sampling we're only required to ask a few. There's also less data to process than in a census. However, there are of course disadvantages to sampling. It does give less accurate results than a census. And the sample may not be large enough to give accurate information about the small subgroups of the population. So, for example, here you can see that the person highlighted in green is not included in our sample. Here's a summary of the advantages and disadvantages of sampling. Let's now examine sample size. Here we have a sample size of 3. The individual units of a population are called sampling units. We could select a larger sample, and a larger sample size will generally give more accurate results, but of course, more resources will be required. A varied population means a larger sample will be needed, and different samples will give different results. Now let's examine the ideas surrounding a sampling frame. When sampling units are numbered to form a list, we have what we call a sampling frame. Here's a summary of some of the key points we've just looked at. Now let's take a look at an example. Pause the video and have a go. Press play when you're ready to view the solutions. Let's begin with example 3a. A grocer would like to test a delivery of oranges for ripeness by slicing off a piece from each orange sampled. Explain why the grocer should not test all the oranges in the delivery. So let's solve this. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, testing all the oranges would mean that there would be nothing left to sell. Now let's take a look at part B. The grocer tests 4 oranges and finds that 3 of them are ripe. The grocer estimates that 75% of the oranges in the delivery are ripe. What could improve the accuracy of this estimate? So let's solve this. The grocer could take a larger sample to obtain a better estimate of the overall proportion of ripe oranges. This brings us to the end of this session. If you have understood its contents, you should be able to understand the terms population, sample, and census, and comment on the advantages and disadvantages of each. Thank you very much for listening. To understand this topic in greater depth, do attempt the exercises in your textbook related to this topic.